My daughter gave me the basement saying, "This or a nursing home." After 40 years paying her bills, I discovered their plan to sell my house. 3 months later, I got my revenge. And I love it, and you will too. If you're watching this, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I never thought I'd spend my 62nd birthday moving into a basement. "It's just temporary, Mom," Amanda said, not meeting my eyes as she carried a box of my belongings down the narrow stairs. The smell of mildew wrapped around me like an unwelcome embrace. "Until we figure something out," Richard added, checking his watch impatiently. My son-in-law hadn't bothered to hide his annoyance all morning. I watched silently as they reduced my life to a few boxes. 40 years of memories, condensed and labeled. 5 years since Robert died, supposedly from a heart attack, and 2 years since Amanda and Richard began helping with my finances. Now I was being moved to the basement of my own home, the home I'd paid for. "We're just concerned about your memory lapses," Amanda said for the 100th time, setting down a box labeled books. "The stairs to your bedroom are dangerous for someone in your condition." "What condition?" I wanted to scream. I've never missed an appointment, never forgotten a birthday, never failed to recall even the smallest details of my family's lives. But they had repeated it so often. "Your memory isn't what it used to be, Mom. Remember when you forgot to turn off the stove?" That sometimes I caught myself wondering if they were right. "This is more practical," Richard said, his tone suggesting I should be grateful. The nursing home alternative would cost a fortune. The ultimatum had come yesterday. Move to the basement or be sent to Pinecrest, a facility I'd once visited with a library book club. The memory of its medicinal smell and vacant-eyed residents made my stomach turn. "I'll take the basement," I'd whispered, hating how my voice trembled. Now, I sat on the edge of a twin bed that sagged in the middle, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the constant hum of the water heater. Through the small ground-level window, I could see feet passing by on the sidewalk outside. "We'll bring dinner down later," Amanda called as they headed back upstairs. The door closed. A lock clicked. I was alone. Years ago, I'd had the foresight to hide $200 in cash inside a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice, a book Amanda had always dismissed as boring. After Robert's death, something in my gut told me to be prepared. I'd hidden the emergency money in the basement bookshelf during one of my cleaning sessions, never imagining I'd be living down here myself. With shaking hands, I opened the box labeled personal. Inside were photo albums I'd managed to insist on keeping. I pulled one out and began turning pages. There I was, 30 years younger, working extra shifts at the school library to pay for Amanda's college tuition. Another showed me standing proudly beside the car I'd bought her when she graduated. And there, the day we put a down payment on this house. "For our family's future," Robert had said, his arm around my shoulders. My fingers traced his face in the photograph. What would he think now, seeing me relegated to the basement? Seeing his daughter using my monthly library pension of $2,800 while telling me there was barely enough for groceries. A sudden pain shot through my chest, not heartache, anger, pure molten anger. It rose up so suddenly I gasped. I'd never been an angry person. Patient Margaret, understanding Margaret, always putting others first. Where had that gotten me? I carefully replaced the album and walked to the tiny bathroom attached to my new apartment. In the mirror, a stranger looked back, gray, diminished, uncertain. When had I started hunching my shoulders? When had my voice become so soft? Upstairs, laughter erupted. My birthday hadn't been mentioned once. I straightened my shoulders and met my own eyes in the mirror. "Enough," I whispered, the word hanging in the damp basement air. Enough. The first months of basement life changed me profoundly. The silence became my companion. The darkness, my constant reminder of where I stood in the hierarchy of my own home. I heard Tyler and Jessica, my grandchildren, arguing above me as they prepared for the family Christmas dinner. "It's not right," Jessica's voice carried through the vents. At 16, she had her grandfather's sense of justice. "Grandma should be at the table with us. Mom says she gets confused around too many people," Amanda responded sharply. I closed my eyes, pressing my palm against the cold basement wall. Another lie in the elaborate tapestry they'd woven about my condition. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. The door wasn't always locked. Amanda and Richard used the lock strategically, usually at night or when they had guests. They'd given Jessica and Tyler limited access to me, allowing them to bring meals or pick up laundry. "Grandma," Jessica whispered, slipping through the door. "I brought you a plate." Her eyes widened as she took in my surroundings, the dehumidifier running constantly, the buckets catching leaks from the ceiling, the small space heater barely warming the damp air. "It's fine, sweetheart," I said, taking the plate. Turkey, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, all slightly cold. "Thank you." "They're doing photos now," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Dad said you weren't feeling well enough to join." Another convenient excuse. I hadn't been invited to family gatherings since the move. My old friends from the library had stopped calling after Amanda told them about my early onset dementia. "Did they give you your Christmas present yet?" Jessica asked. I smiled, pointing to a pair of socks on my bed. Used, with the store tag still attached. Jessica's face flushed with shame. "I got you something," she whispered, pulling a small package from her pocket. Inside was a cheap prepaid cell phone. "Hide it. Call me if you need anything." After she left, I sat on my bed, turning the phone over in my hands, the first gift in months that acknowledged I was still a person. Later that night, I developed a cough that rattled deep in my chest. The damp air had been working its way into my lungs for months. By morning, I could barely breathe. Jessica found me when she brought breakfast. Without telling her parents, she called a taxi and pressed $40, her entire month's allowance, into my hand. "Go to the hospital, Grandma, please." 3 days I spent in that hospital bed. 3 days without a single visit from my daughter or son-in-law. Only Jessica called the hospital phone, checking on my progress. Surprisingly, no doctor questioned my living conditions. Amanda had explained away my pneumonia as just her age and promised proper care at home. When I returned, shuffling down the basement stairs with a prescription for pneumonia, I knew immediately something was wrong. My few possessions had been disturbed. The wooden jewelry box that contained my mother's pearls and my grandmother's engagement ring was empty. "I've put your valuables somewhere safe," Amanda informed me when I confronted her, her voice dripping with false concern. "In your confused state, you might lose them." Behind her, Richard scrolled through his phone, showing off pictures of their new boat to a neighbor. "We were worried sick about you, Mom," Amanda continued, though her eyes never left her coffee cup. Wandering off to the hospital without telling anyone, I felt something crack inside me, a dam breaking. "Jessica called the taxi," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "She gave me her allowance." Amanda's face darkened. "Jessica has an overactive imagination, like when she claims you're perfectly coherent. We've had to limit her visits to you." That night, alone in my basement prison, I pulled out Jessica's hidden phone and stared at it. I had no one to call. My world had shrunk to these damp walls and the sporadic kindness of my grandchildren. As if summoned by my thoughts, a soft tap came at my door. Tyler, my 14-year-old grandson, slipped in with a sandwich and a glass of milk. "Don't tell Mom," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously to the door. "Are you okay, Grandma? Really okay?" I looked at this child, suddenly realizing he might be my only ally besides Jessica. "No," I answered honestly, my voice barely audible. "But I think I might be someday." He nodded slowly, understanding more than a child his age should have to. "Maybe I can help," he said. "Look at this," Tyler whispered, pointing at the screen of his laptop. 2 weeks had passed since he'd offered his help. Now my grandson was showing me how to access old financial records I didn't even know existed. We sat huddled in my basement room while Amanda and Richard attended a boat show. "I found where they keep your mail," he explained. "They've been hiding your bank statements." My hands trembled as I stared at the digital record. My monthly pension of $2,800 continued to flow into an account I hadn't seen in 18 months, since Amanda had obtained power of attorney during my pneumonia hospitalization. This was different from the medical power of attorney she'd gotten 5 years ago when Robert was in his accident and I was hospitalized with stress. "See these withdrawals?" Tyler pointed to a series of transactions. "That's the boat payment. And this one? Their country club membership? My life savings, methodically drained. But something else caught my eye, a massive deposit from 5 years ago." "What's this $1.5 million?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Tyler typed rapidly, pulling up more documents. "Insurance payment," he said. "Grandpa's life insurance." I felt the blood drain from my face. Robert's policy was for $500,000. I'd never seen a penny of it. There's more, Tyler said, glancing nervously at the door. Jessica found something in Mom's office, a box they didn't know she saw. He pulled out a manila folder from his backpack. Inside were printouts of emails between Amanda and a real estate agent. They're planning to sell the house, Grandma. Your house. I scanned the correspondence with growing horror. They were claiming I had transferred ownership to them, that my condition had worsened. There were references to forged documents being prepared. The closing is in 2 months, Tyler said. And look at this. He pointed to another email thread. A brochure for a facility called Sunset Gardens was attached, with an admission date circled, coinciding perfectly with their planned European vacation. I found this when Dad asked me to print their itinerary, Tyler added, showing me a loan statement. $15,000 for their trip to Italy, taken out in your name. My chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from rage. A slow-burning fire that steeled my resolve instead of paralyzing me. There's something else you should see, Tyler said, his voice dropping even lower. He pulled up a series of emails from 5 years ago. As I read, the room seemed to tilt around me. Robert hadn't died of a heart attack. He'd been in a car accident, left in a coma. Amanda had made the decision to terminate life support, against medical advice suggesting possible recovery. She'd used the medical power of attorney she obtained when I was hospitalized for stress after his accident. Why? I gasped, gripping the edge of the desk. More emails provided the sickening answer. Robert's life insurance policy had a triple indemnity clause for natural death. $1.5 million instead of $500,000 for an accident. Money that had funded their lifestyle, their failed business ventures, their home renovations. They needed it to be a natural death, Tyler said, his young face grave beyond his years. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of this betrayal crushing my chest. Not just financial abuse, my husband, my Robert, given no chance to fight, to recover. Grandma? Tyler looked worried. Are you okay? I opened my eyes, seeing not just the documents before me, but years of manipulation, the gradual isolation, the repeated suggestions of my mental decline, the careful construction of a narrative where I was incompetent, burdensome. No, I said quietly. I'm not okay, but I will be. I reached for Jessica's hidden phone. Tyler, is there anyone you think might help us? Anyone your parents wouldn't suspect? He thought for a moment. My computer teacher, Mr. Davidson. He's retired now, but he was friends with you and Grandpa, right? Before Mom told everyone you were sick? Walter Davidson. Of course, my old friend from community college days, who'd become the school's computer teacher after retiring as an accountant. Amanda had dismissed him as one of Mom's boring friends years ago. Can you get me his number without anyone knowing? Tyler nodded, determination replacing fear on his young face. We need to be careful, I warned. Your mother can't know what we're doing. It could be dangerous. For who? Tyler asked. I met his eyes steadily. For all of us, but mostly for them. The kitchen smelled of Sunday pot roast as I wiped down the countertops. This was my designated chore, cleaning up after meals I wasn't invited to join. The small privileges of leaving my basement quarters were carefully controlled by Amanda and Richard. I heard voices from the dining room, Amanda and Jessica in a heated discussion. Can't just ship her off to some facility. Jessica's voice was strained. Lower your voice, Amanda hissed. Grandma has reached a point where she can't make decisions for herself anymore. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect the elderly. I froze, sponge in hand, listening intently. But she seems fine whenever I talk to her, Jessica insisted. That's called showboating. Amanda sighed dramatically. It's common with dementia patients. They can pull themselves together for short interactions, then fall apart when alone. My jaw clenched. Another lie. Another psychological manipulation designed to gaslight not just me, but my grandchildren as well. So why are we selling her house? Jessica demanded. She loves this place. Richard's voice joined the conversation. It's not her house anymore, Jess. It's our house. Your grandmother signed it over to us last year. A blatant lie. I had signed no such document. And what about that nursing home brochure I saw? Jessica pressed. Sunset Gardens is a wonderful facility. Amanda's voice took on a rehearsed quality. The money from the house sale will help us open that day spa we've been dreaming about. Wouldn't you like to have your own room at the spa? You could help out on weekends. I gripped the counter to steady myself. They were bribing my granddaughter with promises while planning to discard me. What about Grandma? Jessica's voice broke. She'll be all alone. She'll be properly cared for, Richard said dismissively, and we'll visit on holidays. The scrape of a chair, running footsteps, the slam of a door. Jessica had left the table. I quickly resumed wiping counters as Amanda stormed into the kitchen. Teenagers, she muttered, barely glancing at me. So dramatic about everything. Are you almost done here, Mom? Richard and I have plans to review for his consulting business. Richard had started a financial consulting practice 6 months ago after his previous business venture failed. Amanda worked as the marketing director for a local spa chain, the very industry she hoped to enter herself with the money from selling my house. Almost, I murmured, keeping my eyes down, my posture submissive, playing the role they expected. That night, a folded paper slipped under my door. Tyler's handwriting. Found this in Dad's printer tray. It was a confirmation printout from Sunset Gardens, a bare-bones elder care facility with countless violations according to the fine print at the bottom. My admission date was scheduled for July 12th, the day after Amanda and Richard's European trip began. Attached was a loan statement showing $15,000 borrowed in my name for medical expenses, my name forged on the dotted line. I sat on my bed, staring at these papers that represented the final phase of my children's betrayal. Tomorrow, Walter Davidson was coming to visit, while Amanda and Richard were at work, the first outside contact I'd had in months. Tyler had arranged it, using the excuse of computer tutoring. I reached for the phone Jessica had given me and dialed the number Tyler had provided. Walter, it's Margaret Sullivan, I whispered when he answered. Yes, Robert's wife. I need your help. It's about Amanda and Richard, and what they did to Robert. A pause. What do you mean, what they did to Robert? I thought he had a heart attack. So did I replied, my voice steadying with each word. Until yesterday. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my basement room, listening to the house creak above me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel helpless. I felt something far more dangerous. I felt purposeful. A soft knock at my door. Jessica slipped in, sliding the simple latch that Amanda and Richard used to control my movements. Locked at night and when they had visitors, but accessible to the children for delivering meals and necessities. I heard what they said at dinner, she whispered. About sending you away, about the spa. I'm so sorry, Grandma. I took her hands in mine. Don't be sorry. Be ready. For what? She asked. I looked into her eyes, Robert's eyes, and felt a surge of resolve. For them to finally face what they've done. Walter Davidson's face registered shock as he surveyed my basement living conditions. My God, Margaret, he whispered, setting down his laptop. His visit was disguised as a computer tutoring session for Tyler, but Amanda and Richard were at work, giving us precious hours of freedom. It's been like this for months, I said, keeping my voice steady. But that's not the worst of it. Tyler connected Walter's laptop to the home network, while Jessica kept watch upstairs. Together, we showed Walter everything. The financial records, the emails about the house sale, the plans for Sunset Gardens. When we reached the emails about Robert's death, Walter's face went white. This is criminal, he said, his accountant's mind already calculating the extent of the fraud. Multiple kinds of criminal. Can you help us track where the money went? I asked. Walter nodded grimly. I still have some contacts, but Margaret, you need legal help, not just financial tracking. I know, I replied, but I need evidence first. For the next hour, Walter used his expertise to follow the money trail. The life insurance payment, the drained accounts, the loans taken in my name. They've burned through most of that insurance money, he concluded, showing me spreadsheets that tracked their spending patterns. Failed business ventures, the boat, luxury vacations. They're in debt again, which explains the sudden urgency to sell your house. I felt a strange calm settling over me. The house they don't actually own. Exactly, Walter confirmed. I've checked the county records. The house is still in your name. They'd need your signature, or a forged one, to transfer it. I need to understand the timeline of all this, I said. Amanda has 2 different powers of attorney, correct? Walter nodded as he reviewed the documents. Yes. She obtained medical power of attorney for both you and Robert 5 years ago when he had his accident, and you were hospitalized with stress. That's what she used to make decisions about Robert's care. Then, 18 months ago during your pneumonia hospitalization, she obtained financial power of attorney over you. 2 separate legal instruments for 2 different purposes, I murmured, the pieces finally fitting together. Tyler had been unusually quiet. Now he spoke up. "Grandma, there's something else." He pulled up another email thread between Amanda and Richard. I read it slowly, my blood running cold. They'd been discussing my unfortunate accident that might occur during their European trip, an expected complication of my condition. Walter read over my shoulder, his breath catching. "Margaret, this suggests they're planning to make sure I never come back from Sunset Gardens," I finished. "Yes, I see that." Jessica appeared at the basement door, signaling that we had 15 minutes before her mother returned from her hair appointment. "We need a lawyer," Walter said urgently. "Today." I hesitated. "I have no access to money. They control everything." Walter's expression softened. "Not everything, apparently." He gestured to the hidden phone, the secret meetings, my grandchildren's loyalty. I remembered my emergency fund then. "Wait," I said, crossing to the small bookcase. Behind a row of photo albums sat my old copy of Pride and Prejudice, a book Amanda had always dismissed as boring. I pulled it out, opened the hollowed center, and extracted an envelope. "After Robert died, something felt wrong," I explained. "I started setting aside small amounts from my pension before Amanda took control. I kept this hidden when they moved me down here. Inside was $3,200 in cash, my secret safety net that I'd built up gradually after Robert's death." Sensing something wasn't right. "Will this be enough to start?" I asked. Walter nodded. "I know someone, Diane Reynolds. She specializes in elder law. She'll work with us on the payments once we get your accounts unfrozen." As Walter prepared to leave, I held his arm. "Thank you for believing me." He looked at me intently. "Margaret, I've known you for 30 years. When Amanda started telling everyone about your condition, it never sat right. But I didn't investigate. I didn't check on you." His voice broke slightly. "I won't make that mistake again." After he left, I sat with Tyler and Jessica, planning our next steps. We needed to move carefully, document everything, build an irrefutable case. "They'll be suspicious if we change our behavior," I warned my grandchildren. "We need to act normal." "I hate pretending they're not monsters," Jessica said fiercely. I took her hand. "Not monsters, just desperate, selfish people who've lost their way, and who won't see consequences coming until it's too late." Tyler looked troubled. "What if they find out what we're doing? They could send you away sooner." I thought about the emails suggesting something more permanent than Sunset Gardens, about Robert, whose chance at recovery had been sacrificed for money. "Then we make sure they don't find out," I said firmly. "And we work quickly." Later that night, alone in my basement room, I found myself staring at old photographs. My hand traced Robert's face in our wedding picture. "I'll make this right," I whispered to his image. "For both of us. You need to sit up straighter." "Mrs. Sullivan," Diane Reynolds instructed, adjusting my posture. "Speak clearly. Make eye contact. The judge needs to see you're competent." 3 weeks had passed since Walter introduced me to Diane, a sharp-eyed attorney specializing in elder abuse cases. We were in her office, preparing for the emergency hearing to freeze my accounts and revoke Amanda's power of attorney. "They've spent 2 years convincing everyone I'm in mental decline," I reminded her, falling back into my habitual hunched posture. "It's become instinctive to appear as they expect. And that's exactly what we're fighting," Diane replied firmly. "Show me the real Margaret Sullivan." I straightened my spine, raised my chin, and met her gaze directly. The one who raised an ungrateful daughter and put her through college. The one who survived being gaslit and isolated. The one who's done letting people take advantage of her kindness. Diane smiled. "Perfect. Hold on to that energy." Walter entered with a thick folder. "I've completed the financial analysis. They've embezzled approximately $1.67 million from Margaret over 5 years, including the insurance money and monthly pension." He shook his head grimly. "And I've found evidence of similar patterns in Richard's consulting business. He's skimming from clients." "We need to move quickly," Diane said. "The house sale is scheduled for 6 weeks from now." My heart raced. 6 weeks to undo years of manipulation and theft. "What about Robert's medical records?" I asked. "The email suggests the doctors thought he might recover." Diane's expression tightened. "I'm working on that. Amanda used medical power of attorney to make those decisions. Proving malicious intent is difficult, but not impossible," Walter added, squeezing my hand reassuringly. That evening, Amanda seemed agitated as she dropped off my dinner tray. "We'll need you to sign some papers next week," she said casually. Just routine updates to your care directives. I kept my eyes down, playing the role. What kind of updates? Nothing important, she waved dismissively. Just transfer of property agreements that should have been done earlier, given your condition. My pulse quickened, but I maintained my facade of docility. Of course, dear. After she left, I immediately texted Jessica using our secure messaging app. Within minutes, Tyler slipped downstairs with Richard's laptop. Dad left it unlocked, he whispered. I've got 15 minutes before they notice I'm gone. I quickly searched through recent emails, finding what we feared: communications with a document forger about creating backdated property transfer papers. Tyler took photographs of the emails with Jessica's phone, then hurried back upstairs with the laptop. Later that night, Walter called with news. Diane's gotten the emergency hearing scheduled for next Tuesday. The judge will decide whether to freeze all transactions and assets until a full investigation. I felt a mixture of hope and terror. Tuesday was 5 days away. 5 days where Amanda and Richard might realize something was wrong. What if they try to get me to sign those forgeries before then? I asked. Stall, Walter advised. Say you're not feeling well. Ask to read them carefully first. Anything to delay. The next morning, I made a calculated decision to appear more frail than usual at breakfast. When Amanda commented that I looked awful, I murmured something about not sleeping well and feeling dizzy. Maybe we should postpone our meeting with the lawyer until you're stronger, Richard suggested, exchanging a meaningful glance with Amanda. I nodded weakly, inwardly triumphant. One hurdle cleared. That afternoon, while pretending to nap, I heard Amanda on the phone with the real estate agent. The buyers are getting impatient. Yes, we're aware of the timeline. No, there won't be any problems with the documents. My mother's condition makes things complicated, but we're handling it. That evening, Jessica brought down clean laundry and whispered, Mom's called a doctor to come check on you tomorrow. I think they're documenting your decline for the paperwork. I nodded, unsurprised. Then let's give them what they expect. When the doctor arrived the next day, I played my role perfectly, slightly confused, deferring to Amanda, appearing disoriented about dates, all while catching the doctor's subtly leading questions designed to confirm Amanda's narrative. After he left, I heard Amanda on the phone again. Yes, Dr. Matthews' assessment should provide the backup we need. No, she won't be a problem. The European tickets are confirmed for July 12th. As darkness fell, I sat in my basement room, rehearsing Tuesday's testimony with Walter over the phone. For the first time in years, I let myself fully embrace the anger burning inside me. You sound different, Walter remarked. I am different, I replied, my voice stronger than it had been in months. They took my husband, my home, my dignity. They won't take my future too. Later, alone in the darkness, I caught my reflection in the small bathroom mirror. The hunched shoulders were gone. The averted gaze replaced by a direct stare. The timid expression transformed into something harder, more resolved. The woman they'd created, fearful, dependent, confused, was disappearing. In her place stood the woman I'd forgotten I could be. Ready? Diane asked as we sat in the courthouse hallway, waiting for our emergency hearing. I smoothed down the jacket Walter had brought me, my first proper outfit in months. Not the shapeless cardigans and sweatpants Amanda had decided were appropriate for my new life. More than ready, I replied, feeling the weight of the evidence folder in my lap. The door opened, and Amanda stepped out with her attorney, stopping short when she saw me. For a second, naked shock registered on her face, not just at my presence, but at my appearance. The carefully styled hair, the professional clothing, the straight posture, and clear eyes. Mom, she gasped, what are you doing here? Before I could answer, the bailiff called our case number. Inside the courtroom, Amanda's shock transformed to fury as Diane presented our emergency petition, a temporary injunction freezing all my assets and suspending Amanda's power of attorney pending investigation of financial exploitation and elder abuse. This is ridiculous, Amanda hissed to her lawyer. She can't even manage her daily medications. Judge Harriet Chen, a severe-looking woman in her 60s, studied the financial documents Walter had prepared. These allegations are extremely serious, Mrs. Kennedy, she addressed Amanda, using her married name. Amanda's attorney, a young man who seemed increasingly uncomfortable, tried to redirect. Your Honor, Mrs. Sullivan has documented cognitive issues. Her daughter has been managing her affairs appropriately. I see no medical documentation in this file confirming cognitive impairment, Judge Chen replied coolly. Only a power of attorney obtained during a hospitalization. We can provide assessments, Amanda's attorney offered quickly. From doctors you selected and briefed, Diane countered. We request independent evaluation, Your Honor. Judge Chen studied me carefully. Mrs. Sullivan, do you understand these proceedings? I met her gaze steadily. Completely, Your Honor. I understand that my daughter and son-in-law have systematically isolated me, convinced my friends and community that I'm mentally incompetent, diverted my pension, controlled my movements, and are now attempting to sell my home without my consent while planning to place me in a substandard care facility. The courtroom fell silent. I continued, my voice gaining strength. I also understand they've done this after potentially making medical decisions for my late husband that may have prioritized insurance payouts over his chance of recovery. Amanda half rose from her seat. That's a lie. You're confused, Mom. You don't know what you're saying. Order, Judge Chen snapped, then turned back to me. Mrs. Sullivan, these are grave accusations. Do you have evidence beyond the financial records? Yes, Your Honor, Diane replied, presenting copies of the emails Tyler had discovered about Robert's treatment, the house sale, and the arrangements for me at Sunset Gardens. As the judge reviewed them, Amanda's face drained of color. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear. After what seemed like an eternity, Judge Chen looked up. I'm granting the emergency petition. All assets are frozen pending full investigation. Power of attorney is temporarily revoked. She leveled a stern gaze at Amanda. And I'm issuing a protective order. Mrs. Sullivan is not to be removed from her residence, and Mrs. Kennedy is to have no financial dealings concerning her mother's property. Where is she supposed to live then? Amanda snapped. She needs supervision. In her home, the judge replied firmly. The home that remains legally in her name. If supervision is medically necessary, it will be arranged through adult protective services, not family members with clear conflicts of interest. Outside the courtroom, Amanda confronted me, her voice low and venomous. What have you done? After everything we've done for you? I met her gaze, no longer cowering. Everything you've done to me, you mean? You'll regret this, she hissed. Richard and I were protecting you from yourself. No more lies, Amanda, I replied quietly. It's over. That evening, Walter helped me move out of the basement and back into my proper bedroom. Amanda and Richard, furious but powerless under the court order, retreated to their part of the house. As I unpacked my few belongings, Jessica slipped in with a small box. I found these in Mom's jewelry drawer, she whispered, opening it to reveal my grandmother's engagement ring and my mother's pearls. I thought you should have them back. I hugged her tightly, overcome with gratitude for this brave young woman who'd refused to accept the narrative her parents had constructed. Later, I stood alone in my bedroom, my real bedroom, looking out at the garden Robert and I had planted together. The rose bushes needed pruning. The bird feeders hung empty. Like me, they'd been neglected, but not beyond recovery. Tyler appeared in the doorway. Grandma, is it true you're staying? Yes, I assured him. I'm not going anywhere. What happens now? He asked, his young face troubled. I sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside me. Now we gather the rest of the evidence. For the full hearing, will Mom and Dad go to jail? His voice was small. I looked at this child, caught between loyalty to his parents and his innate sense of right and wrong. I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on what we find, and on them. I did the right thing, didn't I? Helping you? I wrapped my arm around his shoulders. You did the right thing by standing up for the truth. That's always right, even when it's painful. As moonlight filtered through the curtains, I made a silent promise. Not just to myself or to Robert's memory, but to these children who deserved better than the example their parents had set. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about legacy. They're up to something, Jessica whispered, slipping into my bedroom. It had been 2 weeks since the emergency hearing, and the atmosphere in the house had shifted from open hostility to something more calculated. What kind of something? I asked, looking up from the financial documents Walter and I had been reviewing. They're being nice, Jessica explained, her forehead creased with suspicion. Dad offered to help Tyler with his science project. Mom made your favorite scones for breakfast. I nodded, unsurprised. They've realized intimidation isn't working. Now they're trying manipulation. The full hearing was scheduled for next month. Diane was building a comprehensive case, and Adult Protective Services had conducted their initial assessment, finding clear evidence of emotional abuse and financial exploitation. "Do they think we'll just forget everything?" Jessica asked incredulously. "They think I might withdraw the case if they convince me they've changed," I explained, "or at least agree to a private settlement that keeps them out of criminal court." A soft knock at the door. Tyler entered, looking troubled. "Dad wants to talk to you," he said. "He's waiting in the living room." I exchanged glances with Jessica. "Both of you stay upstairs," I instructed. "I'll handle this." Richard was standing by the fireplace, examining the family photos on the mantel, photos that had been restored to their proper places after being hidden away during my basement exile. "Margaret," he greeted me with forced warmth. "You're looking well." "What do you want, Richard?" I asked, remaining standing despite his gesture toward the sofa. His smile faltered slightly. "I was hoping we could talk, clear the air." "About what specifically? The forged loan documents? The life insurance money? The plans to sell my house? Or perhaps about Robert's medical care?" Richard's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his composure. "Look, things got out of hand. We made mistakes. But we're family. Family doesn't exploit family," I replied evenly. He sighed dramatically. "Amanda's devastated by all this. She only wanted what was best for everyone." "Including planning my accident during your European vacation?" Richard blanched. "That was a misunderstanding. Poor choice of words in those emails." "I think the judge will disagree," I said coldly. He changed tactics. "Margaret, court cases are expensive, messy. Do you really want to put the kids through that? Have them testify against their own parents? A low blow, trying to use my love for my grandchildren as leverage." "The children have already seen enough," I replied. "They've watched their parents lie, steal, and abuse their grandmother. What lessons do you think that's teaching them?" Richard's pleasant facade cracked. "Those kids wouldn't have anything if not for us. The private schools, the vacations, the opportunities, all provided with that money." "My money," I corrected. "Robert's life insurance, our home." "You weren't using it," he snapped, then immediately regretted his outburst. I stared at him, finally seeing the full extent of his entitlement. "So that justified taking it? Is that your defense, Richard? She wasn't using her money, so we took it?" He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "What do you want? To see Amanda in prison? Your own daughter?" "I want justice," I replied simply. "For Robert, for myself. We can make a deal," he offered, lowering his voice. "We'll pay everything back, sign the house over to you officially, give you full independence." I almost laughed. "You can't pay back what you don't have. Walter's analysis shows you've burned through most of that money, and the house is already mine." It always was. Richard's desperation became palpable. "Think about it, Margaret. Family reputation, the scandal. Is that what Robert would have wanted?" At the mention of my husband's name, something inside me snapped. "Don't you dare speak his name," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Not after what you did to him." Richard took a step back, genuinely startled by my transformation. This wasn't the meek, confused woman they'd cultivated. "Your consulting business isn't doing any better than your last venture, is it?" I asked, remembering Walter's research. "That's why you're still skimming from clients, using the same techniques you practiced on me." His eyes widened fractionally, confirmation that Walter's findings were accurate. Richard had moved from embezzling from me to defrauding his clients, a pattern of financial misconduct that spanned years. "The hearing proceeds as scheduled," I continued. "Now, unless you have something productive to add, I believe we're done here." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Richard froze, his eyes darting to the entrance. "That would be Susan Barnes from the Chronicle," I informed him with a small smile. "We're doing an interview about elder financial abuse. Would you like to contribute your perspective?" Richard's face contorted with rage. "You vindictive old—" "Careful," I interrupted. "Jessica is at the top of the stairs. Tyler is probably recording this conversation. Choose your next words wisely." He stormed out the back door as I went to greet Susan, a former colleague from the library who'd been shocked to learn the truth about my situation. Later, as Susan and I finished our interview in the garden, she asked a final question. "After everything they've done, could you ever forgive them?" I looked at the rose bushes Robert and I had planted, now beginning to bloom again under my care. "Forgiveness requires remorse," I replied carefully. "I haven't seen that yet, but I have seen something else." "What's that?" Susan asked. My own strength, I answered. And sometimes finding that is more important than forgiveness. The house hummed with tense energy. 1 week until the hearing, and Amanda and Richard had shifted strategies again, this time attempting to intimidate witnesses. Walter says they showed up at his house last night, Jessica reported, slipping into my room with her phone. They tried to convince him he was remembering things wrong about their financial requests over the years. I shook my head, unsurprised but disappointed. Did it work? Jessica grinned. He recorded the entire conversation. Diane says it's more evidence of witness tampering. A small victory, but concerning nonetheless. Amanda and Richard were growing desperate as the hearing approached. The protective order prevented them from directly threatening me, but they were finding other targets. They called my computer teacher too, Tyler added, entering with a sandwich he'd made for me. Trying to discredit your mental state, but Ms. Garcia shut them down. She said you were always the most organized library volunteer they had. I smiled gratefully at my grandchildren, these unexpected allies who'd grown so much through this ordeal. At 16 and 14, they'd shown more integrity than their parents. Diane arrived that afternoon for our final preparation session. Her expression was grim as she set her briefcase on the dining room table. The opposition has filed a last-minute psychiatric evaluation, claiming you show signs of paranoid ideation, she informed me. They're requesting the case be dismissed. Let me guess, I replied. Dr. Matthews? The same doctor who visited right before the emergency hearing? Diane nodded. Fortunately, our independent evaluation from Dr. Patel directly contradicts his findings, but it shows they're pulling out all stops. What else should we expect? I asked. They'll attack your relationship with the children, Diane said bluntly. Claim you've manipulated them against their parents. Jessica, listening from the doorway, stepped forward. We can submit our recordings, show how they were the ones manipulating everyone. Diane hesitated. That's complicated. You're minors, and recording conversations without consent is legally problematic in this state. So they get away with it? Tyler asked, his voice cracking with frustration. No, Diane assured him. We have enough documentation without crossing legal lines. The financial evidence alone is damning. After Diane left, I found myself alone in the garden, contemplating the rose bushes Robert and I had planted for our 20th anniversary. They were blooming again after years of neglect, a small symbol of resilience that brought me comfort. Mom? Amanda stood at the garden gate, her expression carefully neutral. This was our first direct conversation in weeks, as she'd been avoiding me since the emergency hearing. May I join you? She asked with artificial politeness. I nodded, curious about this new approach. She sat beside me on the garden bench, smoothing her expensive skirt. Beautiful roses, she commented. Dad always did have a green thumb. I'm the one who planted these, I corrected quietly. Your father built the trellis. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance at the correction, quickly masked. Of course, my mistake. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again. Mom, this has all gotten out of hand. We never meant things to go this far. I waited, saying nothing, giving her space to continue digging her own rhetorical grave. The misunderstandings, the financial confusion, it all spiraled, she continued. But we're family. Surely there's a better way to resolve this than courts and public humiliation. What would you suggest? I asked neutrally. She brightened, sensing an opening. We drop all this legal nonsense. Start fresh. Richard and I will move out, give you your space. We'll work out a repayment plan for any funds that were misallocated. And the criminal implications? I pressed. The falsified documents? Robert's medical decisions? Her face hardened slightly. Those were terrible misunderstandings. Bringing them into public view helps no one. It might help prevent other families from experiencing what I did, I countered. Mom, she leaned forward, her voice dropping. Think of Jessica and Tyler. Do you really want them to see their parents dragged through court? Possibly facing jail time? I studied my daughter's face, the face I'd once looked upon with unqualified love. When had she become this person? Was it Richard's influence? Something in her upbringing? Or a fundamental character flaw I'd failed to recognize? Amanda, I said finally, I've had a lot of time to think, especially during those months in the basement. Do you know what I've concluded? She waited expectantly. That I've been making excuses for your behavior since you were a teenager, always finding reasons, explanations, justifications, always believing you'd grow out of your self-centeredness. Her expression darkened. That's not fair. What's not fair, I continued steadily, is manipulating an elderly parent, isolating them, gaslighting them into believing they're incompetent, planning to abandon them in a substandard facility while stealing their home. We were trying to protect you, she snapped, the facade cracking. From what, Amanda? From my own money? From my independence? From the truth about how Robert died? She stood abruptly. This was a mistake. You're clearly still confused and vindictive. I remained seated, looking up at her calmly. The hearing is next week. I'll see you there. As she stormed away, I noticed Jessica standing at her bedroom window, watching the entire interaction. She gave me a small thumbs up. That evening, Tyler showed me something on his laptop. A private messaging conversation between Richard and their real estate agent, dated that morning. We need to expedite this sale, whatever it takes, Richard had written. We're facing significant legal expenses. The European trip is off, but we need exit capital. How quickly can we close if we drop the price by 15%? They were still trying to sell my house, despite the court order, still scrambling for escape funds. I looked at Tyler's worried face. It's okay, I assured him. They can't sell what they don't own, but they're still trying, he said. They're never going to stop, are they? I thought about Amanda's visit to the garden, the transparent manipulation, the complete lack of genuine remorse. No, I answered truthfully. I don't think they will, not until they're forced to. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Susan's article in the Chronicle about elder financial abuse had drawn attention to the case, and several advocacy organizations had sent representatives. Amanda and Richard sat with their attorney, a more seasoned lawyer than the young man from the emergency hearing. They'd upgraded their legal representation, it seemed. Ready? Diane asked, squeezing my hand as the bailiff called our case. I nodded, surveying the room. Walter sat directly behind me, his presence reassuring. Jessica and Tyler were absent. Diane and I had agreed they shouldn't have to testify unless absolutely necessary, but their depositions were in our evidence folder. Judge Chen entered, and the proceedings began. Diane presented our case methodically, building a devastating narrative of financial exploitation, psychological manipulation, and medical malfeasance. Walter testified about the financial analysis, tracing the path of Robert's life insurance money through Amanda and Richard's accounts, luxury purchases, failed business ventures, and the boat they could no longer afford payments on. Dr. Patel presented his independent psychological evaluation, confirming I showed no signs of cognitive impairment or dementia, directly contradicting the assessment Amanda had engineered. Throughout it all, I watched my daughter's face. No remorse, only calculation as she whispered urgently to her attorney. When it was my turn to testify, I approached the stand with steady steps. Gone was the hunched posture, the uncertain gaze. I was dressed in a blue suit Walter had helped me purchase. Professional, dignified, a visual rejection of the confused elderly mother narrative Amanda had constructed. Mrs. Sullivan, Diane began, please describe when you first noticed changes in your living situation after your husband's death. For the next 30 minutes, I detailed the gradual isolation, the systematic undermining of my confidence, the incremental restrictions on my movements and finances. And when did you move to the basement? Diane asked. December 12th of last year, I replied. My 62nd birthday. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Was this move your choice? I was given two options, the basement or a nursing home. Since I knew the nursing home they had selected was substandard, I chose the basement of my own home. And how would you describe the conditions there? Damp, cold. The ceiling leaked when it rained. I developed pneumonia after 3 months, requiring hospitalization. Amanda's attorney objected repeatedly, but Judge Chen overruled him, allowing my testimony to continue. Then came the cross-examination. Mrs. Sullivan, Amanda's attorney began, his tone condescending. Isn't it true that you've experienced memory lapses in recent years? No, I replied firmly. It is true that my daughter and son-in-law repeatedly told me I was experiencing memory lapses. They repeated this so often to me and others that some people, including myself at times, began to question my memory. But the independent evaluation confirms no such impairment exists. The attorney shifted tactics. Your daughter was named your power of attorney. Didn't you consent to this arrangement? While hospitalized with pneumonia and under heavy medication, I signed documents I was told were routine. I was not informed I was signing over power of attorney. Back and forth it went. Each attempt to paint me as confused or manipulated by Walter and the grandchildren was met with clear, factual responses. Finally, the attorney played what he clearly thought was his trump card. "Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it true that your real motivation here is revenge? That you're bitter about your daughter's success and seeking to punish her?" I paused, considering the question carefully. "My motivation is justice," I replied evenly. "For myself, for my late husband, whose medical care was compromised for financial gain. And yes, for my grandchildren, who deserve to see that exploitation and abuse have consequences, regardless of who commits them." When I returned to my seat, Walter squeezed my shoulder supportively. After lunch, the surprise we'd been anticipating arrived. Dr. Thomas Chen, the neurologist who had treated Robert, entered the courtroom. Amanda visibly paled. Dr. Chen testified about Robert's condition after the car accident, the encouraging brain activity, the positive responses to stimuli, the treatment plan he'd recommended. "In my professional opinion," he stated clearly, "Mr. Sullivan showed promising signs for potential recovery." I was surprised when life support was withdrawn against my recommendation. Amanda's attorney tried to salvage the situation, but Mrs. Kennedy had medical power of attorney. She was within her rights to make that decision. Legally, yes, Dr. Chen conceded. Medically, it was premature. By late afternoon, Judge Chen called a brief recess before closing arguments. In the hallway, I encountered Amanda alone, her expression unreadable. "It's not too late to stop this," she said quietly. "Before sentencing, before it goes further." I studied her face, searching for any sign of genuine remorse, finding none. "It was too late," I replied. "The moment you decided your father's life was worth less than his insurance policy." Her composure finally broke. "You have no idea the pressure we were under, the debts. Richard's business was failing. We needed that money." There it was, the closest thing to a confession she'd ever offered. "And that justified everything else?" I asked. "The basement? The isolation? Planning to abandon me at Sunset Gardens?" She had no answer, only simmering resentment in her eyes. "I'll see you inside," I said, turning away from my daughter, this stranger who shared my blood but apparently none of my values. As I walked back into the courtroom, I felt an unexpected lightness. Whatever the judge decided, I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, my truth, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. 6 months after the verdict, the house was quieter. The legal process had moved more slowly than we'd hoped, but with eventual results. Amanda and Richard had moved out, a condition of their probation and the civil settlement. In a plea bargain that considered the complex legal issues, they'd avoided jail time by agreeing to full financial restitution, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. The criminal charges related to Robert's death had been harder to prove, resulting in a separate ongoing investigation rather than immediate charges. The medical decisions, while ethically questionable, had been made with legal power of attorney, complicating prosecution. Now I sat in my garden, enjoying the spring sunshine, when Walter arrived with lunch, a picnic basket, and a bottle of iced tea. "The roses look beautiful," he commented, setting up our meal on the patio table. "You've brought the whole garden back to life." It was true. The hydrangeas were blooming again. The bird feeders attracted finches and chickadees. The vegetable patch Jessica had helped me plant was yielding early spring lettuce and herbs. "Any word from Amanda?" Walter asked carefully as we ate. I shook my head. "Not directly. Her therapist called yesterday. Apparently, part of Amanda's treatment is making amends, but the therapist wanted to check if I was open to communication before proceeding." "And are you?" I sighed, looking out at the garden Robert and I had created together. "I honestly don't know. Part of me says absolutely not. Part of me remembers she's still my daughter." Walter covered my hand with his. In the months since the trial, our friendship had deepened into something more. A tender companionship neither of us had expected, but both welcomed. "There's no rush to decide," he reminded me. "The boundaries you've set are healthy. She needs to respect them." The doorbell rang, interrupting our lunch. Tyler appeared at the patio door. "Grandma, Mom's here." My heart raced. I didn't agree to see her yet. "I know," Tyler said. "I told her that, but she insisted. She said she just wants to give you something. She promised not to stay if you don't want her to." I exchanged glances with Walter, who nodded supportively. "I'll be right here." In the living room, Amanda stood awkwardly, holding a small package. She looked different, thinner, less polished, wearing simple jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you for seeing me." "I haven't agreed to a conversation yet," I replied, maintaining my distance. "Tyler said you have something to give me?" She nodded, extending the package. "I found this in storage. I thought you should have it back." I unwrapped the package slowly. Inside was Robert's watch, the vintage Omega his father had given him, missing since his death. "I took it," Amanda admitted, her voice barely audible. "After the funeral. I was so angry at him for leaving us, for getting in that accident. It was childish and wrong." I held the watch, running my thumb across its worn face. Robert had worn it every day of our marriage. "I'm in therapy now," she continued when I didn't respond. "Twice weekly. Richard and I are separated. The divorce papers are filed." I looked up, surprised by this news. "The therapist is helping me understand why I did what I did." She twisted her hands nervously. "It's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what happened to you. What we did to Dad." "No," I agreed quietly. "Nothing does." "I've been diagnosed with narcissistic tendencies," she continued, "stemming from childhood insecurities, my therapist thinks. I was always jealous of your relationship with Dad. How close you two were. I felt excluded." I thought back to Amanda's teenage years, her rebellion, her distance, her apparent resentment of family time. Had I missed something essential? Had Robert and I inadvertently created patterns that contributed to this damaged adult? "Again, not an excuse," Amanda added quickly. "Just context I'm working through." Silence stretched between us. Finally I spoke. "Thank you for returning the watch." She nodded, turning to leave, then paused. "The restitution payments will continue as ordered. I've taken a job at the community college, administrative assistant. It's a fraction of what I was making at the spa chain, but it's honest work." So that's what she'd been doing all these years, marketing director at a spa chain, the very industry she hoped to enter herself, using my money. The puzzle piece finally fit. "And Richard?" I couldn't help asking. "Last I heard, he's facing securities fraud charges from his consulting work." "We don't speak anymore." She hesitated. "Jessica and Tyler are welcome to visit him if they choose. They haven't wanted to." "That's their decision," I replied. "They're old enough to make those choices." Another awkward silence. Amanda reached for the door handle. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said suddenly. "I wouldn't forgive me either, but I am sorry, Mom. Truly sorry. For everything." For the first time, I detected something genuine in her voice, a crack in the facade, a glimpse of authentic remorse. "I believe you're sorry now," I said carefully, "but trust has to be earned back through consistent actions, not just words or momentary regret." She nodded, accepting this boundary. "May I write to you as part of my therapy process?" "You don't have to respond." I considered this request. "You may write. I may or may not read the letters immediately. I need time." "Of course." She opened the door. "Thank you for seeing me today." "It's more than I deserved." After she left, I returned to the garden where Walter waited patiently. I showed him Robert's watch, explaining Amanda's unexpected visit. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. I gazed at the garden, at the home I'd reclaimed, at this kind man who'd helped me recover my stolen life. "I'm thinking that forgiveness and reconciliation are different things," I replied slowly. "I may eventually find a way to forgive, for my own peace, not hers. But reconciliation requires much more than a single apology or moment of clarity." "That sounds wise," Walter said, "and entirely your decision to make, on your own timeline." As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, I felt a complex mix of emotions: grief for all that had been lost, gratitude for what had been saved, and a cautious, fragile hope that perhaps, someday, healing might be possible for all involved. But for now, boundaries remained necessary, trust remained broken, and my focus remained firmly on rebuilding my life, one day, one choice, one reclaimed decision at a time. My 63rd birthday dawned bright and clear. 1 year since that fateful day when Amanda and Richard moved me to the basement, the day that ultimately set in motion my reclamation of everything they'd tried to take from me. As I prepared for the small gathering Walter had organized, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the hunched, fearful person who had moved into the basement 1 year ago. My hair, once deliberately left gray and unkempt to match their narrative of my decline, was now stylishly cut and returned to its natural silver. My posture was straight, my gaze direct. The shapeless clothes had been replaced with outfits that reflected my personality rather than their perception. "Grandma, they're starting to arrive," Jessica called up the stairs. Downstairs, the living room had been transformed with birthday decorations. Walter greeted guests while Tyler arranged gifts on the coffee table. My home, truly mine again, hummed with warmth and conversation. Susan Barnes from the Chronicle was there, along with 3 former colleagues from the library. Diane Reynolds arrived with her wife, carrying a potted orchid. Even Dr. Patel had accepted the invitation, curious to see how his former patient was thriving. "The house looks beautiful, Margaret," Walter said, bringing me a glass of champagne. "So do you." I smiled, surveying the transformation. After Amanda and Richard moved out, Walter had helped me redecorate. The formal, showpiece furniture they'd preferred had been replaced with comfortable, inviting pieces. The stark white walls now displayed colorful artwork, some my own paintings, a hobby I'd rediscovered after decades. "Speech," called Susan as everyone gathered with their drinks. I hadn't prepared anything formal, but the words came naturally. "A year ago today, I moved into the basement of this house," I began. "I believed I had no choices left, no voice, no future." The room quieted, guests listening intently. "Today, I'm celebrating not just another year of life, but a reclamation of my home, my finances, my dignity, and most importantly, my sense of self." I raised my glass toward Jessica and Tyler, who stood together near the fireplace. To my grandchildren, whose courage showed me mine wasn't lost, just buried. To Walter, whose friendship became my lifeline. To all of you who believed me when others didn't. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed. The party flowed around me as I moved from guest to guest, engaging fully, laughing often, rediscovering the social confidence that had been systematically undermined. As I headed to the kitchen for more appetizers, Jessica followed me. "There's someone else here," she said quietly. "Outside on the porch. She didn't want to intrude, but asked if she could leave something for you." I knew immediately who it was. "Amanda's here?" Jessica nodded. "She looks different. Better, maybe. She said she understands if you don't want to see her." I gazed at my granddaughter, this remarkable young woman who had stood by me when her own mother had betrayed me. "What do you think I should do?" "That's entirely your decision, Grandma," she replied with wisdom beyond her years. "But speaking for myself, I've started reading the letters she sends me. They're honest, in a way she never was before." I considered this. The past 3 months, Amanda had written weekly as part of her therapy process. I'd read some letters, left others sealed. The ones I'd read showed painful self-awareness and genuine remorse, so different from the manipulative apologies of the past. "I'll speak with her briefly," I decided. "But stay close." Jessica squeezed my hand. "Always." On the front porch, Amanda sat on the steps, a small gift bag beside her. Hearing the door, she stood quickly, uncertainty written across her face. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said softly. "I won't stay. I just wanted to drop this off." I studied her. The expensive highlights were gone from her hair, the designer clothes replaced by simple, modest attire. But the most striking change was in her eyes, the calculating coldness replaced by something more vulnerable, more human. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the bag. Inside was a hand-bound journal with pressed flowers on the cover. "I made it in my therapy craft group," she explained awkwardly. "The flowers are from Dad's favorite hiking trail. I go there sometimes now to think about him, about the choices I made. I traced the delicate pressed violets with my fingertip. It's beautiful. Thank you." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, so much unspoken, so much damage done. "Your letters," I said finally. "I've read some of them." Hope flickered across her face. "They're true. All of them. The therapy is difficult, facing myself, what I became, what I did to you and Dad." I nodded, acknowledging this without offering absolution. "And Richard?" "The divorce was finalized last month. He's serving community service hours at the hospital where Dad was treated." She glanced down. "I've learned to support myself now. The community college job is honest work. My apartment is small, but it's mine. No shortcuts, no manipulations." "That's good to hear." Another silence. Amanda looked toward the setting sun. "Jessica mentioned Walter has been a good friend to you. I'm glad you're not alone." "He's more than a friend now," I replied. She nodded. You deserve happiness, Mom. After everything, you deserve it more than anyone. For the first time, I heard no undertone of manipulation in her words. Just simple, painful truth. I should go, she said, turning toward the steps. Thank you for seeing me. Amanda, I called as she reached the bottom step. She turned back, expression cautious. Would you like to stay? Just for a slice of cake? Surprise registered on her face, followed by cautious gratitude. Are you sure? I don't want to ruin your day. It's just cake, I replied carefully. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps a small step. Inside, the party continued. Walter raised an eyebrow when Amanda followed me in, but supported my decision with a gentle smile. Jessica squeezed her mother's shoulder awkwardly. Tyler watched from across the room, uncertain but curious. As the evening wound down, guests departed with warm hugs and promises to visit again soon. Amanda left after a single piece of cake, understanding the boundaries, respecting the fragile beginning. Later, Walter and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the garden. Are you okay? He asked, his arm around my shoulders. Having Amanda here was unexpected. I considered the question carefully. I think so. Not healed, not reconciled, but open to the possibility that people can change, that damaged relationships might someday be rebuilt, even if they never look the same. That's a birthday gift in itself, he observed, the capacity to remain open-hearted after everything. I leaned against him, watching the stars emerge. The greatest victory wasn't the court case, I said thoughtfully. It was finding myself again, the woman who existed before all the gaslighting and manipulation. Before I started believing their lies about who I was, Walter squeezed my hand. She was always there, just waiting for the chance to re-emerge. As night settled around us, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year, from basement prisoner to reclaiming my home, from manipulation victim to advocate for elder rights, from believing I was helpless to discovering my own power, and perhaps most importantly, from seeing myself through others' distorted lens to defining myself on my own terms, complex, flawed, resilient, and ultimately unbreakable. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.